Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources and really dig into them for the most fascinating nuggets of knowledge. Today, we're diving into a captivating American mystery, this one from the early 20th century.
Oh, yes. It's a case that has, well, puzzled investigators and frankly captivated the public for over 100 years now. It's just filled with scandal, social intrigue, and a truly baffling crime scene.
So our mission today is to unpack the Hall Mills murders. We'll explore the key players, the shocking events, and the many theories still swirling around this unsolved case. You'll gain a really thorough understanding of why this remains one of history's most intriguing enigmas. Okay, let's get into it.
Before we dive into the crime itself, we need to understand the central figures. First, Reverend Edward Wheeler Hall. Tell us about him. Right, Edward Hall, born 1881. He came from a deeply religious New York family, very strong ties to the Episcopal Church. He did very well academically, pursued religious studies, and, well, ultimately became the popular rector of St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church right there in New Brunswick, New Jersey. He was known for his, eloquent sermons, his compassion, and really extensive community support. Respected figure.
So a highly respected figure on the surface, but his personal life. There were whispers from the start, weren't there?
Indeed. In 1911, he married Frances Noel Stevens. Now, she was 7 years older than him, from a very prominent, wealthy New Brunswick family. And despite how things looked, rumors started circulating pretty quickly that Edward's motive might have been more about her, well, substantial fortune than actual love. Their marriage was reportedly quite fraught. Financial tensions, social expectations, and let's just say Edward's noted fondness for certain female members of his congregation.
Which brings us right to Mrs. Eleanor Reinhardt Mills. Who was she in this picture?
Eleanor Mills was born in New Brunswick, 1888. Much humbler background than the Halls or Stevens, but she had this real passion for singing. In 1905, she married James Mills. He was actually the acting sexton at Reverend Hall's church and also worked full-time as a janitor. They had two kids, Charlotte and Daniel. And Eleanor, well, she sang in the church choir and was very faithful about attending practices.
And it was right there, within that church community, that the talk of an improper relationship really started to circulate, right?
It's exactly right. Despite trying to keep it secret, their frequent private meetings, their affectionate interactions, they hadn't gone unnoticed, not at all. Parishioners, locals, they gossiped about the couple's clandestine rendezvous. People noted that they often met in secluded spots, even sometimes inside the church itself.
Wow. What's fascinating here is how these whispers, in what sounds like a pretty close-knit community, really set the stage for such a public and tragic event. It wasn't just a secret. It was almost like an open secret.
Precisely. And that open secret dynamic, it meant the community was already sort of primed for scandal. It wasn't just if something would happen, but maybe when all that social tension would just erupt. And you see, this pre-existing judgment heavily influenced how people saw things, how the media reacted once the bodies were found. It kind of set the stage for perceived guilt long before any evidence was properly looked at. It really shows how fast speculation can just take over,
Yeah, it definitely sets a tense scene. Okay, so the stage is set with these tangled lives and secrets. But the story takes its really dark turn on the morning of September 16th, 1922. What happened then?
So that Saturday morning, a couple, Raymond Schneider and Pearl Balmer, they were out walking to Russey's Lane, this secluded spot near Phillips Farm, just out of New Brunswick. They were supposedly looking for mushrooms. As they got near this crabapple tree, they discovered a man and a woman lying underneath it.
And the scene itself? Immediately chilling, wasn't it?
Oh, profoundly disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The woman's face was covered with a shawl, the man's face hidden by his hat. Raymond cautiously lifted the hat, found the man was dead, shot once in the head, then he lifted the shawl. The woman was also dead. She'd been shot 3 times under the right eye, right temple, above the right ear, and her throat had been cut. Gruesome.
The reports describe a very specific arrangement of the bodies, too, almost staged.
Yes, exactly. They appeared to have been deliberately positioned. The description suggests something like a ritualistic display. Their arms were placed so they almost touched.
What other crucial details did the first officers on the scene find?
Well, importantly, no sign of a weapon. So a murder, not suicide. There was a calling card carefully placed right at the man's feet and scattered all around were these torn-up love letters. Police painstakingly pieced them back together, finding all these expressions of love and affection. The woman, she was wearing her wedding ring, a blue velvet hat, and this very distinctive red polka dot dress.
This sounds like a scene just crying out for careful investigation, but then the initial response seems to have gone completely sideways. What went wrong?
Yeah, unfortunately it was. Well, it was a mess from the start. First, there was this jurisdictional dispute, Somerset County, Middlesex County. The crime scene was right near the border. While the authorities were trying to figure that out, word got out fast. And the site was just overrun by morbid curiosity seekers, people walking everywhere, trampling potential evidence. They even took souvenirs. Can you believe it? And that calling card. It was actually passed around among the crowd.
That's staggering. A crime scene turned into a public attraction, souvenirs being taken. I mean, how did this immediate contamination affect the investigation down the line?
It was devastating, really. A foundational flaw. Handprints, footprints, any other tiny clues. Basically lost or degraded, just gone. Eventually, Detective George Totten from Somerset County managed to take control, clear the crowd, get the bodies moved. The coroner, Dr. R.M. Long, figured they'd both been dead at least 36 hours, killed by a .32 caliber gun. But because of the contamination, he couldn't even confirm if they were killed right there at that spot.
Given the calling card, the location, it didn't take long to identify the victims, did it? And that just cemented the whole scandalous nature of the thing.
No, it didn't take long at all. The man was identified as 41-year-old Reverend Edward Wheeler Hall. His own calling card gave him away. And his wife, Frances Stevens Hall, had actually reported him missing about 24 hours earlier. The woman, she was 33-year-old Mrs. Eleanor Mills. Married, 2 kids, and of course, well known to the Reverend. She sang in his church choir.
So the rumored affair confirmed in the most grim way possible. What did the police immediately rule out as a motive, and what did they zero in on?
Well, Reverend Hall's gold watch was missing. But his wallet, which had coins in it, was still there, and Mrs. Mills's jewelry, untouched. So based on that, robbery was pretty quickly ruled out, seemed unlikely. Instead, investigators immediately focused on that improper relationship between them. That became the central theory, the motive for this awful crime.
And how is Mrs. Mills's situation viewed in the community regarding this affair? Was there any sympathy or...
Well, people who knew her suggested her marriage to James Mills was unhappy. Lots of financial struggles, maybe emotional dissatisfaction too. And the thinking was this perhaps made her susceptible to the Reverend's charm, his position. Maybe it seemed like a kind of romantic escape from her mundane and difficult life. Bit tragic, really.
And the public and the press just devoured this narrative, didn't they? The scandal must have fueled the fire.
Oh, absolutely. The bodies, the torn love letters, it instantly turned from just a murder investigation into this lurid tale of passion and betrayal. The public, the press, they were fascinated by all the scandalous details. The affair became the absolute focus of massive media coverage.
James Mills, Eleanor's husband, he must have been an immediate suspect. What was his involvement? What did the investigation find?
Naturally, investigators thought maybe he'd found out about the affair, committed the murders, driven by jealousy and rage. It's the obvious first thought. But James Mills actually seemed genuinely distraught. He cooperated fully with the police. He had an alibi, too, said he was home working late the night of the murders. His kids confirmed it, and even a neighbor complained about the noise he was making. Crucially, there was just no physical evidence putting him at the scene. He did admit, though, that he went looking for Eleanor several times that night, even went to the church. And interestingly, Eleanor's daughter, Charlotte, told the police her mother had actually talked about possibly getting a divorce on the very day she disappeared.
Were there any other sightings around that time, trying to piece together a timeline?
Yes, there were. Witnesses saw Mrs. Mills alone in DeRussey's Lane on the evening of Thursday, September 14th. That's 2 days before the bodies were found. And Reverend Hall, he was also seen there around 9 p.m. that same night. And Mrs. Mills had apparently tried calling the Hall house twice that evening, but couldn't get through to the Reverend.
Okay, so the initial investigation seems to hit a wall after looking at James Mills. How did it pick back up, and who did the focus shift to?
Right. By late October, the case felt like it was going cold. So it was put into the hands of a special prosecutor, Wilbur A. Mott. And then the focus shifted pretty dramatically, away from James Mills and onto Mrs. Frances Stevens Hall, the Reverend's wife. Investigators started wondering, did she know about the infidelity? Did she believe he was about to leave her? And did she perhaps arrange the murders to, preserve her social standing and avoid public humiliation?
What about her alibi? Was it solid?
Well, she maintained her innocence, claimed she was home that night. Her maid, Louise, confirmed it, at least initially. But the police weren't entirely convinced. They also started looking closely at her brothers, Henry and William Stevens. Henry was described as kind of very exclusive, maybe erratic. William apparently had intellectual disabilities, and both of them, well, they had a potential motive. protect their sister's honor and their shared family name, keep the scandal contained.
And were there any sightings of the brothers near the scene? Anything suspicious?
Yes, some witnesses did eventually come forward. They said they'd seen the brothers not far from the crime scene on the night of the murders.
Mm.
And and their behavior afterwards was apparently considered a bit suspicious too. But, and this is big but, their family was very prominent, wealthy, connected. That complicated things significantly when trying to build a case against them early on. Their status was a shield.
This whole thing really blew up into a nationwide sensation, didn't it? How was the press covering it?
Oh, absolutely. It was dubbed the Hall Mills murder case. Newspapers everywhere provided daily, often sensationalized updates. You had this mix of a lurid affair, gruesome murders, prominent families. It just completely captured the public's imagination. It was the story.
Then this really pivotal but also very controversial witness emerges, Mrs. Jane Gibson. The press called her the pig woman. What was her story? Why was it so impactful, even with its problem?
Right, Mrs. Gibson. She was a local pig farmer. She claimed that on the night of September 14th, she was woken up by raised voices. She says she went outside, saw 4 figures in the dark, and she identified one, she claimed, as Mrs. Frances Stevens Hall wearing a long coat. She described hearing a heated argument, saw a man fall after being shot, then heard a woman shout, "Don't," before more shots rang out and saw the woman fall too. Her story, I mean, it was inconsistent in places, but it directly placed the Stevens family, or at least Frances, right at the scene, directly contradicting their alibis. Huge.
So, despite the first investigation kind of fizzling out due to lack of solid evidence, the story wasn't over. What brought it all roaring back 4 years later? What led to actual charges?
Okay, so fast forward to 1926. A man named Arthur Reel is filing for divorce from his wife, Louise Gist. Now remember Louise. She was Mrs. Hall's former maid who initially backed her alibi. Reel claimed that Louise had told him that Frances Hall knew her husband was planning to leave her for Mrs. Mills. And according to Reel's story, Frances, along with her 2 brothers, confronted the couple that night, September 14, 1922. He alleged the brothers then killed Edward and Eleanor to protect Frances's honor, and Louise had basically been paid hush money.
Wow, that must have been absolutely explosive. What happened then?
It certainly was. Now, Louise Riel immediately dismissed her husband's claims as nonsense, maybe motivated by the divorce. But the allegations, plus the media frenzy they created, got the attention of the governor, A. Harry Moore. He ordered a second, much more intensive investigation, and that was the real turning point, based on, well, reinterpretations of old evidence, Jane Gibson's testimony, and maybe this new claim. They felt there was enough to prosecute. So charges were brought against Mrs. Frances Stevens Hall and her brothers Henry and William Stevens. Another relative, Henry Carpenter, was initially charged too, but that was dropped due to a strong alibi and lack of evidence against him.
And speaking of grim discoveries, right before the trial, something truly shocking came out, didn't it? About Eleanor Mills' body.
Yes, absolutely chilling. They discovered that Eleanor Mills' original autopsy report had somehow been misplaced, lost. So her body had to be exhumed for a new autopsy before the trial. And this new examination revealed something horrific that had been missed the first time. Her tongue had actually been cut out on the night she was murdered. It just added this terrible layer of brutality, maybe symbolism,
Right.
silencing her. It was deeply disturbing.
This trial itself must have been an absolute media circus. How did it play out in court?
Oh, it was a spectacle. Started November 3, 1926, in Somerville, New Jersey. Drew vast public and media attention, huge crowds. Mrs. Stevens Hall, remember her family's wealth? She hired a top-notch defense team led by Robert H. McCarter, very skilled lawyers. Jane Gibson, the pig woman, she was actually terminally ill by then. They brought her into court on a hospital bed. She was compelling, but her testimony was just full of inconsistencies under cross-examination. Her story kept changing slightly. The defense really ridiculed her, effectively destroying her credibility in the eyes of the jury.
Were there any other key bits of evidence? Anything that seemed like it should have sealed the deal but didn't?
Well, there was one man who testified he'd seen Henry Stevens near the crabapple tree that day. But he only came forward months later, so the defense argued his memory was unreliable, his timing suspicious. And perhaps most intriguingly, William Stevens' fingerprint was found on that calling card left at Edward Hall's feet.
That sounds like a smoking gun. How did the defense counter that?
Right, you'd think so. But the defense lawyers were brilliant in a way. They hammered home how disastrously that crime scene had been handled. They reminded the jury about the crowds, people trampling everything, even passing the card around. So they argued, convincingly it seems, that anyone could have touched that card. The fingerprint evidence was essentially rendered useless because of that initial contamination. a direct consequence of the early failures.
So with all that circumstantial evidence, the questionable witnesses, the compromised scene, what was the final verdict?
The evidence just remained stubbornly circumstantial. The defense did a masterful job highlighting the lack of any direct proof tying the Stevens siblings to the actual murders.
Hmm.
So on December 3rd, 1926, the jury found all three defendants, Francis, Henry, and William, not guilty. And that verdict, well, it just deepened the mystery and the public's fascination. It didn't really satisfy anyone seeking closure. And you have to think the status and influence of the Stevens family surely played a role throughout.
So what happened to Mrs. Frances Stevens Hall after the trial? Did life go back to normal?
She tried. She attempted to resume a normal life, but the stigma,
Hmm.
it lingered. Of course it did. She escaped New Brunswick, lived in the very house she'd shared with Edward, right up until she passed away in 1942. She never remarried, never publicly discussed the case again. The acquittal gave her legal freedom, but it certainly didn't erase the public suspicion.
Connecting this all to the bigger picture, it's clear this case just never really faded away, did it?
Yes.
What are the main theories people still talk about today? What really happened?
Well, the most straightforward, and probably still the most widely believed theory, is that the murders were driven by jealousy and a desire to preserve family honor. A lot of people still think Mrs. Frances Stevens Hall, feeling humiliated by the affair, possibly got her brothers involved to kill both Edward and Eleanor. For many, yeah, they simply got away with murder.
Are there any other credible theories floating around, different angles?
There's the robbery gone wrong idea, suggesting they were maybe just in the wrong place at the wrong time, stumbled upon by robbers. But like we said, not much was actually stolen, just the watch. And that weirdly deliberate positioning of the bodies, it just doesn't fit a simple robbery very well. It weakens that theory significantly. Some have also speculated about maybe a different spurned lover, someone else involved with either Hall or Mills, but honestly, there's no real evidence for that. It's mostly guesswork.
What about something bigger, a conspiracy? That always comes up in these complex cases with influential people.
Yes, that's another angle. A more complex theory involves a broader conspiracy, maybe involving other influential people in New Brunswick society. Proponents argue the investigation was maybe deliberately mishandled right from the start, specifically to protect certain parties from being exposed. They point to all those procedural errors, the inconsistencies, things that could suggest a cover-up, especially given the social standing of the Hall and Stevens families. It's a compelling thought for some.
With all the forensic science we have today, DNA, better ballistics, could we ever actually solve this now? Is there any hope?
You know, modern techniques like DNA analysis, advanced ballistics, they could potentially shed new light, theoretically. But the huge challenge is that severe contamination and the loss of evidence right at the beginning. It's just incredibly difficult to overcome that after a century. The scene was so badly compromised, finding intact, usable evidence now, it's an almost insurmountable hurdle, sadly. So the case remains really one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries in American criminal history.
It's just fascinating how that mixed the scandal, the social intrigue, the brutal violence, the questions of class and privilege, how it all grabbed the public's attention and left such a lasting mark. And the true killers, never definitively identified.
It really is a powerful reminder, isn't it? How one event can just echo through history, capture generations, and really challenge how we think about justice, about truth, especially when social status gets mixed in.
So what do you think happened that night out on De Russey's Lane, and what does this whole saga tell us about the power of social standing, rumor, and how they can shape justice even 100 years later?